to earth. Do you remember? Why have we taken birth? Do you remember?
Thank you, Laura. She picked that out especially for this talk. I'm here to be who I was meant to be. And if you looked at the title of this talk, do you really know what it is? It's a surprise. It's a surprise. It's a surprise because I have to talk about what is really going on in my life right now. I have to talk about what's important to me, what lights my fire when I get up in the morning. And so what I'm going to talk about are two things, the power of fear and the power of love, because they really impact every day of our life. They impact how we feel, how we move, how we talk, how we relate to other people. I've been a student of this philosophy since 1989, and I wanted to share with you some things I've learned recently that I really didn't know. And you know, this philosophy started in the late 1800s, even though the concepts go back centuries. But in the late 1800s, there were a group of people that dared to speak up and talk differently about what they believed about God. And some of them took a real hit over that in their lives. So anyway, it's called New Thought because it was really out of the box. You know, for centuries, philosophers and you know, Plato, Aristotle, all these people talked about the oneness, that it's all one. I am, the oneness of it all, that there's nothing but spirit and action here. And we hear about these teachings that God is love and God is law. We heard it from Buddha, we heard it from Jesus, we heard it from Socrates, Aristotle, all the way through history, but it didn't take real tangible results until Jesus started doing miracles, and that shocked the world. So what makes New Thought so special is it's the understanding that spirit is everywhere present. There is no place where God is not. But it's also that our mind is the creative force in our life, our mind. Now, there are different parts of our mind, but we'll get to that. But the mind has the power to create our experience, whether it's really good or not so good. And it also has the capacity to heal our body, which brings me to fear. For the last 20 years, the scientists have been studying the cells of our body, and it's called epigenetics, if you ever see that word, epigenetics. And they've been finding that every cell in our body monitors its environment. It's on the outlook for noxious things and healthy things. And when noxious things come about, whether it's too much of this or that, or emotions, they don't want to operate properly. They kind of pull back and say, wait a minute, we're not going to let that noxious thing in. But when we have fear and we keep pumping fear into our body, and we prolong it and prolong it and prolong it, the cells just can't function normally. That's when dysfunction sets in, sickness. Anybody get a cold after a very stressful situation in your life? Yeah, we've all been there. So the truth about fear is it's really meant to be a very brief thing, because when we have fear over something, such as I see a snake crawling under Michael's chair, not really Michael, he's about to jump up. I see a snake under Michael's chair, I walk the other way. Now my fear is over. It's not prolonged. I don't go on the rest of my life worrying about that snake under Michael's chair. So it's meant to be very brief. It's our intuitive, protective tool for us. But when we hang on to it, it becomes a real problem. Now, I brought a couple of books with me today, and I'm not going to read out of them because you would probably leave. But this one is called The Gift of Fear. Now, how about that? That's a good title, The Gift of Fear. Gavin de Becker. It's a fabulous book. And he said, rule number 1, The very fact that we are experiencing fear is solid evidence that what we're afraid of isn't happening. It's solid evidence it's not happening. Why? Because I would be walking the other way if I was afraid of a snake under Michael's chair. Fear is always about something that might happen. Because when it does happen, we take action, right? And fear dissipates because we're on it. We're walking the other way. So isn't that interesting? Because I've talked to a lot of people lately that the thing that bothers them the most is this fear they're hanging on to. And I'm saying, do not hang on to it. Take action or let it go. Rule number 2, De Becker said, what you really fear is rarely what you think you fear. Rarely. It's what you link to fear. Now, in the 60s, there was a study done, and they wanted to find out what was the one word that scared people the most, that gave them the greatest fear. What do you think it was? The draft. Any other words? Hell? Huh? Hell? No, it was sharks. Sharks. Da 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 da. And they couldn't figure out sharks. Give us a break here. Why? Sharks are unpredictable and they're random. Now, so when we have fear, are we really linking it to something that chances are we aren't going to be out there swimming with white sharks? And it's interesting how we link it. We may not really understand that we're doing that. And it's when we link it to something that's totally unpredictable and very random that we create this real heavy drain on every cell in our body. Now, to me, the level of fear in society right now seems pretty high. I don't know if you see that or feel that in your friends, but I really wonder if a lot of it is really anxiety. Now, it's different than fear. Fear is about something definite you think might happen, but anxiety is about everything. It's just kind of permeates everything. Anxious about, are we going to start on time? Did the music work out? Anxious, is there going to be a line at the grocery store? Anxious, did I hit a red light and I wanted a green light? Anxiety. That you can't really identify one thing that you could walk away from, but it permeates. And De Becker says, you know, when you watch the local news, and you'll probably connect with this, he calls local news information anxiety programs. Because they don't just talk about one thing, then they extrapolate it. And then they extrapolate it again, and if you forgot it, they're going to come back and say, a week ago, this happened here. And so they just extrapolate anxiety. And you worry, not so much worry, that you want to protect yourself from those things, but how often do you really put yourself in those situations where you would really have something to worry about or to fear? And that's why New Thought, Science of Mind, religious science, is so powerful for today's world. Now, just for fun, I gave you some pictures in your program. Has everyone got that? They're really cool pictures. Just really great pictures. And I'm going to talk about these people just a little bit, just to give you a little sense, a taste of who they were. And then I encourage you to Google their names and really find out the juicy stories that go with these, because they're fascinating people. But on the left, I just named some things that also are part of New Thought, although it's really hard to connect it. But Plato was talking about oneness. Christianity, obviously. Hinduism, Buddhism, Theosophy. Emanuel Swedenborg, Horatio Dresser, Meister Eckhart. All these people, you could go into their teachings and find the presence of God, the power of prayer, the power of God's love. You could find that. But the one I wanted to talk to you about today is this book I've been reading, The Manuscripts of Horatio Parkhurst Quimby. Now, he's quite a dashing-looking man there, and he was a clockmaker in Maine, and he was a philosopher, and he turned into a healer, and he was also an inventor. And the greatest desire he had, no matter what he was doing, is to prove to himself that it worked. You know anybody like that? I don't take anything at face value. I have to prove it. So he become fascinated with mesmerism and hypnotism, and how people could hypnotize somebody and they would quack like a duck and act like a duck. And he was fascinated with that. And he was discovering really the power of the mind. Now, he did a lot of experiments, and he healed himself of tuberculosis. Now, when I read this to my husband, who is a retired pharmacist, he said, nah, he couldn't have done that, not in the 1800s. And I said, you know what? It was the 1800s. Doctors said, you've got TB. I mean, did he really? I don't know. He didn't feel good. He was sick. He was having a lot of problems. But, you know, those were also the days when, to solve a lot of these health problems, they put leeches on your skin. So we have to keep it in perspective. We know he was really sick. And you could read about it in his book or online, how he solved his problem. After he did that, he started doing experiments with people, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And because he was looking for proof, he recorded everything. He wrote everything down. He wasn't a good speller, but he wrote everything down. He was meticulous. And what he finally figured out is we have two levels of mind: our conscious mind that we're working with right here, and our subconscious mind that we teach in classes. And you know, it's where you go to remember somebody's name, pull it out of subconscious mind. So he figured that out. Now, he called it lower conscious, but we call it subconscious. Now, Freud also discovered this, but he discovered it 50 years later. So that said something to me. Quimby really got onto something, and it was fresh, and it was new. By 1847, he let go of mesmerism and hypnotism because he concluded with all his experiments that the mind, when it recognized the indwelling presence of God as love, the wisdom of oneness, and our inherent perfection as a creation of God, was far more powerful than hypnotism or mesmerism. He called our mind spiritual matter that could be extrapolated, condensed into a solid substance or experience. For instance, my history of being divorced and thinking of the right man that I wanted to meet, and a week later he showed up. That's what I mean. Spiritual matter, condensing into a solid experience. Not always exactly the way I wanted, but I learned that too. But in the same breath, under a different direction, it could be made to dissolve an experience. Yeah, didn't need him in my life. So Quimby became so good at this, he opened an office in Portland, Maine, and he did mind healing for 7 years. He ran ads in the newspaper. He says, I don't give pills, I don't do surgery, I just talk to you, and healing occurs. That took a lot of guts. An interesting part of his experience was he was fascinated that, you know, in the late 1800s, the traditional church was pretty rigid about what's right, wrong, good, bad. And he often asked his clients, what do you really believe? And then, do you really believe that? He would like dig into it and say, do you really believe in heaven and hell and damnation and sin? And he was fascinated because a lot of those beliefs made people sick. And so he connected all this together. Now, his technique was, I don't want the client to tell me their story. I don't want them to tell me what's wrong with them. I want them to tell me how they feel, what their feelings are, which is what a good practitioner does. And then the feelings and what he saw as the symptoms, he would connect them. I'm afraid of this, and I'm so afraid I can't get out of bed, and dissolve the fear, and it disappears. And so he provided these clients with tangible evidence that their case could intuitively be known and could be healed even at a distance. He had a lot of people he wrote letters to and corresponded, and they're all in the manuscripts. Like Jesus, Quimby was working to find a standard on the science that could be demonstrated. To me, this is profound because I've been in this teaching since 1989. I had no idea how powerful Quimby was. I had no idea. Well, he also found it interesting that the word in the Bible called repent, now you repent for your sins, you can imagine in the late 1800s how powerful that was. Well, it comes from a Greek word, metanoia, which means change your mind. How fascinating is that? And so what Quimby felt was needed was a real understanding, a real working knowledge of how healing can be done just as Jesus did it. By 1861, he was healing over 300 people a year. And by the time he died in 1866, he was healing over 500 people a year. Now, someone wrote somewhere, well, then why did he die? I think he's just tired. He got it all down. He got it all written down. People helped him with his manuscripts. What a great gift he left to the world. And so he wrote all these cases down, and they were later published under the title, The Science of Health and Happiness. Has a little Mary Baker Eddy ring to it, doesn't it? Emma Curtis Hopkins ring to it. Well, in one case that I was reading yesterday, he visited a man who was confined to a bed for 4 years. And Quimby asked the person about their feelings. And then he connected it with how those feelings were working with the body. And I like this part. Quimby said, I asked the client not to believe any faster than he could understand me. Now, I think that's really awesome. That's a really good recognition for a practitioner. Don't go faster than people can understand. And Quimby was a lot like Thomas Troward, if you've taken Troward, the lawyer. He took up every feeling one by one, and he told the client why it was wrong, what the truth really was about them, one by one, like a lawyer building his case. So he identified and analyzed every feeling and the false beliefs behind it. And the client wrote back to him and said, you know, your ideas were so plain, it was really impossible not to understand them. Even though the client had never heard of this, when Quimby left him that day, the client went to bed and just got up the next morning. Just got up, feeling fine. So that's how powerful this is. So Quimby wrote, every thought contains a substance, good or bad, and it makes up a part of your body, and it can be poison or not. By controlling your thoughts, you protect your body system, and in this way, every person is a world unto themselves. That's you. And this is why this morning I wanted to remind you of the power of fear and the impact on your body, and also remind you of the power of love, the love we teach, which is the pulse of the universe. So on your pictures here, you see Quimby, and you see Ralph Waldo Emerson. We do have a class on Emerson's essays, so we don't need to go into him. But then you see Warren Felt Evans. He was a Methodist minister who was healed by Quimby's process and became Quimby's student. And with Quimby's permission, Evans founded his own, listen to this, Mind Cure Sanitarium in Massachusetts, and he taught healing for 20 years. I know, I was just like, oh my God. So I bought one of his books. That's the next one I'm going to read. Then we have Julius Dresser. Julius was cured by Quimby of typhoid pneumonia, and then Dresser worked for him for years, talking with his clients and completing the manuscripts because Quimby was not a good speller. Emma Curtis Hopkins. No, Dresser, Thomas Troward. Okay, Troward, where'd you go? We know Thomas Troward, here he is, because we teach two of Troward's classes. When the first edition of his Edinburgh Lectures came out, philosopher William James of Harvard stated that it was far and away the ablest statement of this philosophy he had ever read. And another editorial said, "This author reveals himself as easily the most profound thinker we have ever met on this subject. That's why we encourage you to take Troward, even though it's a little challenging." The most profound thinker. So now we have Mary Baker Eddy. In 1862, she was a patient of Quimby, and he healed her of many of her nervous diseases or nervous conditions. And she was so in awe by it, she corresponded and met with him several times for the next 5 years. Early on, she gave credit to him for her teachings that she started teaching when she went back home. But after her death, she quoted him less and less, and then finally declared it her own. And so after Quimby died, in 1875, Eddy published Science and Health and Key to the Scriptures. And in 1879, she founded Christian Science, hence the dispute with the Dresser family, who was so dedicated to Quimby. They took great offense at her using his work and not giving him credit for it. They even went to court, and of course, Mary Baker Eddy won that lawsuit. And now we come to Dear Emma. You've heard a lot of Emma lately, because some of our students are studying Emma, and I call her Dear Emma. She's just like a friend to me. She was a student of Mary Baker Eddy. Now, see all these connections? Student of Mary Baker Eddy, and she worked in Christian Science and helped her. And then finally, she had a disagreement, and a lot of it, it's hard to say exactly what, but finally Mary Baker Eddy denounced doctors, but like Emma and Ernest Holmes, hey, whether it's a pill or a prayer, if it works, it's all God. So she left and developed her own movement. She was a great writer, and here's the title of her book, Scientific Christian Mental Practice. It's currently part of our curriculum. Now, Emma was also called the teacher of teachers because later in her life, she just traveled the world and the country and taught other teachers. Ernest Holmes was one of her last students. But also the Fillmores, who started Unity, went to her as a teacher. And the people who started Divine Science went to her as a teacher. So it's a great lineage, you know, and all the connections here are pretty amazing. And of course, then we come to Dear Ernest Holmes. I don't call him Dear Ernest, I just call him Dr. Holmes. And he said, ours is a teaching and healing movement. It is. And it's recognized as one of the leading viewpoints of modern metaphysics, which continues to tick and tack and prove religious science, science of mind, absolutely right. Now, Holmes was a great reader, and he studied the world's spiritual text, but he was greatly inspired by the teachings of Jesus, which has a lot of space in the Science of Mind textbook. Sri Aurobindo, his book was the last one they said Holmes was reading when he died. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Judge Thomas Troward, Emma Curtis Hopkins, he was inspired by them all. And so this ends our surprise lesson today. And in conclusion, I really invite you to think about if you're holding any fear about anything in life, what it may be doing to not only your body, but your relationships and your joy. And I encourage you to replace it with love, because love is the pulse of God in your life. It's the pulse in the universe, love. We take it as romantic love, but when we feel the sunlight on our face in the morning or whatever, we feel that love, and it's really real, and it's extremely healing. But I also hope that looking at these people and the lineage that's behind Science of Mind, that you'll want to take a class with us, because they're really great and they're really rich. So I'd like to conclude with another reading by Mary Baker Eddy, who is, in our lifetime, one of the people that's connected feelings and health issues. And I need my glasses. At the center of my being, there is an infinite well of love. I'll wait for Judy. Thank you, Judy. I meant to give her a cue. This is again from You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. Deep at the center of my being, there is an infinite well of love. I now allow this love to flow to the surface. It fills my heart, my body, my mind, my consciousness, my very being, and it radiates out from me in all directions and returns to me multiplied. The more love I give and use, the more I have to give. The supply is endless. The use of love makes me feel good. It's an expression of my inner joy. I love myself, therefore I take loving care of my body. And my body lovingly responds to me with vibrant energy and health. I love myself, therefore I provide for myself a comfortable space to live with a vibration of love so that all who enter, myself included, will feel this love and be nourished by it. I love myself, therefore I work at a job that I truly enjoy with people that I love and that love me. I love myself, therefore I behave and think in a loving way to all people. I only attract loving people in my world, for they are a mirror of who I am. I love myself, therefore I forgive and totally release all past experiences, and it sets me free. I love myself, therefore I totally live in the now, experiencing each moment as good, and knowing that my future is bright and joyous and secure, for I am a beloved child of the universe, and the universe lovingly takes care of me now and forevermore, and so it is. Thank you.
To love, serve.